Hello kind viewers, in this video I'm going to show you how a simpleton like me puts a timing belt on a first gen Xterra. Now my main issue is the water pump is leaking, so in order to get in that deep you have to take everything off that you would to do a timing belt. So I figured, hey, let's just go ahead and put a new timing belt in while we're at it. Now I've done this before back in, what would that be, November 17. I must have used the Nissan belt right from the dealer, but this time I have these, I bought this, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, Maybe that's how you say it, kit. Now I believe these guys make a lot of the factory parts for Toyota, and Toyota is known to be reliable, so I figured why not. So anyway, I got the whole kit that comes with a belt, water pump, also has the new idler for the timing belt. So that's pretty cool. You definitely want to change that when you do it, because you don't want that bearing going out and having to do it all over. Also, it comes with this spring, which is used to tension that idler, which the first time I did one of these on my old Pathfinder, I actually busted this spring and had a heck of a time finding it. So that's nice that it comes with a new one. I also have a thermostat here, because I've never changed that before, so I figured why not. Step 1. I'm going to take the radiator out. I don't know if you have to. You could probably, might be able to get away with doing this with leaving the radiator in. But I have an issue with the lower radiator support for this is rusted, and the radiator dropped down a little bit and was hitting the fan. You can see where the fan was hitting the shroud because all this went down, and I got it kind of zip tied up. Firstly, disconnect your battery. So right now we're underneath the car looking at the transmission cooler lines. So that's one. And scroll over here to the driver's side, and right there is the second one, and they're just held on by those pinch clamps. So I'm going to take those off, and usually what I do is right here is the lower radiator hose, and usually I just go ahead and undo that, and I put a catch can under here. I don't know, I catch about 10% in the pan, and then 90% goes on the floor. But I figured, if it's all the same to you, there's no reason why I couldn't take this radiator out and unhook this hose up there on the top, and then I'd only drain maybe probably less than half the radiator unhooking it up there. So I'd only catch about 10% of half of the coolant in the radiator, and then spill 90% of half on the ground. Trick with getting these hoses off is you got to get them to twist. If they don't twist, then they'll come off. Sounds like most of it's going in the pail, believe it or not. Oh, there we go. All over the floor. So while that's draining, let's go ahead and take off this upper hose. bolt there for the coolant overflow tank. And over here it's got this air breather thing. Goes to the air box. Unhook that and it's kind of swinging out of the way. I think I'm going to go ahead and screw these back into the holes they came from so I don't lose them. Now we take off these nuts here. Oops. Well, that one just snapped off, so that's not good. So basically now we need to just go ahead and start taking the stuff off here. So let's crack loose all these little nuts that hold the fan on. Here's the technique. So you get them all loose, spin them off by your hand, then you end up dropping them all down somewhere. And you only find 3, so only 3 go back on. I'm just kidding. We put all 4 back on. So out of the 4 bolts that hold the fan onto the water pump pulley, it's the only one that I managed to not drop down below. But they all sounded like they hit the floor, so that's good. Alright, so now let's get this fan shroud off. If my memory serves me correct, you got 2 bolts up here. And then the bottom is just held in by a clip, so you just pull it up. Now you're going to pull the shroud and this fan out, I think, at the same time. You know what? Let me take this hose completely off, get it out of my way. There we are. Now that we got that unhooked, we go ahead and take out this radiator. Yep, it's hooked to it still. Something's holding on to it still, I think. What is it? Is it? There it goes. To speed things along, I'm going to use my little 3/8 impact. These are pretty nice for working on the engine stuff. They don't. The battery powered ones don't quite pack the punch of an air powered one, but I don't have a good air compressor here at my house, so and not having to drag a greasy old air hose around with you everywhere is pretty nice too. So we're gonna get that thing going and I'll make quick work of this stuff. 14 millimeters. So we loosen up this pulley bolt. Don't have to take it off all the way, I don't think. And then we wind this to the right, I believe. Nope, to the left. Hold on. Can't really get on good. All right. To the left. And that loosens it. Down under here there's a nut, so we take that nut off. They changed size on me. Okay, we went down to what does that look like, 12s? 12 millimeters for the bolts that hold this bracket on. Take that nut off. Then we got 2 bolts over here. this comes off that easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just leave all of these bolts and nuts with the bracket they came off with. That way I don't get anything lost or put in the wrong spot. We'll get a close-up on this one. So to take off belt number 2, the one that spins water pump and the power steering pump, the tensioner is underneath here, underneath the this water neck. So to loosen this belt, we'll have to loosen that nut in the center, and then if you come up and you see that slot right there, behind is where that tensioning bolt is. So we're going to have to use some manual labor and get in here with a deep socket, and then that's how we'll get on that and loosen that belt up. So let's loosen up the pulley, and then we'll get our ratchet in here. You got some kind of a sensor on top of this line right here that's interfering with me getting my power tools on it. But it seems that a deep well socket on a ratchet gets you in there. Is it loose? Yep. There we are. Belt number 2 is off. Zip this off. And let's get this one down in here in the shadow. So this bracket here also has 2 bolts. Let's see if I can find them on here. 1 bolt there, that oily, greasy looking one, and then 1 right there. So on the left side of the tensioner pulley. Okay. Do the same thing as before, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw all these back in their holes in an attempt not to lose anything. And I gotta say, I was pretty good about putting all these bolts back in last time I did this. So the last belt we gotta get off is the one that just runs the alternator. So I figured you're probably not going to be able to see this up on the tripod, so I'll bring the camera down just to show you what I'm going to do. So we're going to loosen this bolt here, the top bolt, and then if you look down here, we got we're going to loosen that bolt, and then you see this one going this way. Let me see if I can move this so you can get a better look. Come on, there we go. This one we're going to turn, and that's going to relieve the tension off this so we can pull it off. So just loosen this one, just loosen that one, and then we just turn this one whichever way to make this belt get loose, and then we'll pull that one off. Alright, so now we need to get this big bolt out of the crankshaft that holds this pulley on. And it is a 27 millimeter. Alright, I needed a short socket because this wouldn't fit on the bolt between the AC condenser. And if you only have standard, 1 1/16 socket fits good too. So these tight. If you don't have an impact gun, I'm not sure how you're going to get that off, because that DeWalt impact's pretty strong, and it took a second for it to take it off. So I went to the hardware store and got a couple of M6 by 1 bolts, They're like 3 inches long, and that's what you need to screw into those 2 holes to be able to pull this dampener off. So make sure you get the your screws fully engaged in the flywheel. Don't just catch a couple threads, because you're gonna pull the bolt will pull out and you will be sorry. So yeah, make sure they're engaged. I actually ran a tap through my holes there to make sure, because they were, you know, kind of rusted up and full of dirt, just to make sure, you know, the bolts went in nice. So now I'm going to get my wrench and try to get this dampener off here. Well, that pulled off pretty hard. For whatever reason, that crank snout is all rusted up. So usually they just kind of snap loose and then they come off relatively easily, but that one fought me the whole way basically. And there's also a little coolant tube. You see this tube right here? And there's a couple of bolts up on all this stuff. Like there's one right there, and there's one right there. We got to take those out so we can move this coolant tube and kind of, it has rubber hose on both sides, so it should be able to just kind of push it up out of the way a little bit. I don't think we have to take it off fully. Alright, so I took the two 10mm bolts that hold that thing, this tube in. I remove those, and then we got a pinch clamp over here we got to undo. See if we can get this to wiggle. And maybe we can just pull it and swing it out of the way. There, I just prop it up here. Maybe that'll be out of the way enough. Alright, we'll pull off the upper part of this timing belt cover. Now we just need to do the bottom. A little different. Alright, so we got both the covers off. Now it's time to get it lined up right. So obviously every turn of the crank only turns these cams halfway around. So that's why if you're trying to put it on top dead center, unless you're looking through the spark plug hole, you could be 180 off if you just line up the marks here. So when you get the cover off, put the bolt back in that so you can turn it. And then now the instructions are pretty vague, like where the mark is exactly for this for the crank. So you can see that red line, you can see the dot in the cam, and I just kind of made my own mark there because I got the camshafts lined up. So if you look in there, on that backing cover, you see how that kind of protrudes out there. There's like a little indentation right there that I marked red. You want to line that up with the dots on your cam gears on both sides. There's one. So I got another red dot. That's a little bit better shot of what you're looking for to line up your cam gears. But if you get it like this, I marked everything where everything looks straight. It's a little bit hard to tell on this. one down here, so I've made a red mark on the engine block so I know it hasn't moved once I'm trying to put the belt on. But the belt will have lines in it, and that's where we're going to line up. Well, when we get there I'll show you, but it's fairly straightforward to put the belt on as long as you take your time and double check everything. But for now we're going to take this tensioner off right here. That one nut holds it on. We're going to pull this belt off here, and then we're going to change the water pump. Alright, so this tensioner pulley has a spot for Allen. Once you take that nut off, you can stick an Allen in here and you can turn it, and that takes the tension off the belt, so you can pull it off. That cam already moved a little bit. Drop these washers. Let's get the new water pump out of the box and look at it so we can kind of figure out how many bolts hold it on. So it's got 6 bolts holding this on, and they're all right around the snout pretty much. Looks like they're 12 millimeter. Dropped in my coolant bucket. So now we got to go in here and clean all this gasket up that's on the engine, and then fit the new water pump. So right here is where the thermostat goes. So I got a new one to pop in there, and this appears to be just sealed with silicone, so I cleaned all the old silicone off this neck here. And we shall re-silicone it and pop that back on real quick. I got the water pump on, but that was a bit of a pain because they just wadded that gasket up and threw it in the box, so it didn't want to lay down flat on the pump. It kept trying to curl up. So I put some thin layer of silicone around to try to stick that gasket down, but it was a pain. I put all the bolts in and then lowered it in place to make so the bolts would help hold the gasket in line, and hopefully it stayed, because you know, I guess we'll find out when we go to start it, because if that leaks I'm going to be mad. I'll have to do this all over again. Alright, so I just slipped the new timing belt on. I'll show you how it goes. So you got this one over here. It's got the dotted line. That's the passenger side cam gear. So you got the dot. You line that up with the line on the belt. And then over here on the driver's side, you got the dot, and you got a solid line. And way down here, see if you can see this at all, but you got another dot. On the crank, and you line the line up with that. Now what I did with this one is I actually put a red line in the teeth, because when I'm looking down I can't see that line right there, so I put a red line in the between the teeth, like you know, like right in here, so I when I'm sliding it on I could slide it on right. Alright, so now all we got to do is put the tensioner on, and it has a spring that's kind of weird. So we'll put that spring in there, and that I think helps pre-tension the belt. And then there's like a spec for tension. So we'll get into that once we get the new tensioner on. Okay, so here's the new tensioner. We got the spring, and then we need to put it so that little tab right there goes into this hole. So it goes down like that, and then you just pop that spring in the hole like that. Alright, so this tensioner, that little Allen right there, needs to be facing this way. That way it's fully detensioned. That's how you'll be able to slip this on, right? And you see this little hook right here. That hook goes on to this little stud right here. So what we need to do is, as we're sliding it on, we need to pull this around and kind of hold it over here, because it won't clear this part of the engine block. So we need to hold this spring over on this side of it, and then once we get this pushed on, we can take a screwdriver and push it the rest of the way on the other side of that stud. Alright, so I can let it go now because it's on the right side of this case. Now let's take this Allen and we can turn this here so we can get the belt up on it. There we go. Now we need to grab that end of that spring somehow and then get it up over that stud. Take this little screwdriver. There. Let's take you off the tripod so you can see that. Want it just like that. So you got to get that wrapped around there, and that's going to put tension on this belt. It's already reasonably tight. Now that that's on, I got these two washers. So I had these two washers on the outside for some reason. Now I've done this once before, so maybe one of these washers is supposed to go on the other side, but I'm not sure. So I'm just going to put it back how it was when I took it off. So put these two washers on, and then I'm going to actually put a dab of blue Loctite on that stud and then put the nut back on. And mine, this has torque specifications for everything on it. So hold the tensioner with an Allen wrench and torque the tensioner nut to 32 to 42 foot-pounds. So, you know, pretty snug but not super tight. So I got that nut slightly backed off. And we're gonna get this belt set about where we want it. To adjust the tension of the belt, we want about a half, be able to go down about a ½ inch with 22 foot-pounds put on it. Let's double check with our tape measure, see how much deflection we got in the top of that belt if we can. So much junk, I can't. I'd say it's pretty much right on a ½ inch of deflection, with me pushing pretty firmly with one finger, which I would assume would be close to 20 pounds, I guess. I don't know. Tighten her up. Okay. Now, of course, after you get the belt tensioned and everything, just go through and double check and make sure everything's still where it's supposed to be. You know, everything's still lined up. Look down here. Make sure this one didn't jump off while we were screwing around. Let's see. Yep, we got the white line lined up with the dot. So I think we're good. If you want, you can take your wrench and just go ahead and spin the engine around, make sure everything's going to be happy. Make sure you don't feel any valves hitting pistons, because that'd be an indication that you screwed something up. You know, 230,000 miles, still got quite a bit of compression. Let's just go around a full revolution. Back to where we started, which is right there. Everything's still lined up how it was before. So, oh, don't forget this little thing. Gotta put that thing back on. That's gonna help, because I noticed that my belt was trying to walk off this crank a little bit. So let's just use our fingers and push that back flush. And then we put this thing on. That will keep the belt on, like a belt guide. So don't forget this thing. There, we got that belt guide back on. I'm pretty sure this has to go back on before you start putting the before you put the lower cover back on. So I went ahead and took some steel wool and polished up the snout on the crank, and also the inside hole of this dampener. Now I'm gonna push it on. So for stage one, I found a thinner washer. It's a regular washer I'm going to put on here, and I took this really thick one off that we'll put back on in the end, but this will allow us to catch a few more threads in the crank so we don't strip out the crank, hopefully, when we're trying to run this pulley back on. Now, they probably make a dampener install tool for this, so that's probably the correct way to do it, but I don't have one of those. So we're just going to put this in here, and we're going to tighten it up a little bit. We're not going to ram it down too hard, because we don't want to bottom this bolt out in the crank and then strip the threads out or something. So we're going to take it easy and just ease this on here. Like, I can turn it by hand and I'm watching it go in. Also sprayed a little oil on the the crankshaft snout, so it would go in easier, but this is going in super easy. I would advise you all to look up your own specs. I don't want to be held responsible, but I think that pamphlet said it was like around 150 foot-pounds on this. Just so happens my DeWalt impact gun on power setting 2 is around that tight. So I'm just going to do that, but you know, I would advise other people to use torque wrenches if they want, because that's the right way to do it. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and finish running that down, and then we'll start putting all the belts and getting them tightened up. Alright, we got belt 1 installed. That goes from the crank to the alternator. It's the short belt. I got a Gates. Here's the part number for alternator belt. Now obviously you just once you slip the new belt on, you tighten up this tensioner until you get your desired belt tension. You want it tight enough not to squeak, but not so tight that it's gonna wear out the bearings in this alternator prematurely by pulling on it too hard. And then you tighten up this bolt up here and that bolt when you're done. That locks it in. Belt 2 back on. So you gotta slap this back on because but don't put the bolts in because you still gotta put the fan back on later. But it goes around the crank, around the water pump, underneath the tensioner, back up to the power steering pump. You got to put this bracket here back on. So you got, you know, the bolt here that goes into the water pump, and then where those other two at? Back there. Right. There's the other two. And then it slides onto this. There's a big long stud right here it slides onto. But we don't put the nut back on yet because that other bracket, the last pulley bracket, has to also go on here. So let's move on to belt 3. Here's the belt number for that cranked water pump to power steering pump. Before we put that last bracket on for the last belt, got to put this water neck back on. And here we go with the last belt. So you got that one nut right there that you slip on to that stud, or you put the bracket on the stud and put the nut back on, and then you just got two over here that go into the AC pump. You know, 1, 2, and then you same deal, tighten it up, lock the pulley down. But I just noticed something, so I put on these Gates micro V's. There's the part number for this last belt. And look what it says here. Made in China. So I looked at the old belts that came off, which are also Gates micro V's. But this one was made in the USA. Do you think you now get a discount price on these because they're now made in China? I don't think so. Don't forget to put your two little screws back in that holds this breather tube in that goes inside the valve cover here. Okay, I've been working on getting the radiator put back in. You look down there, I got my transmission cooler lines hooked back up. I got this hose over here hooked back up. Now, before I put the last radiator hose on, I need to slide the fan and shroud back down in here and then get that stuff bolted on. If I can find all those little 10mm nuts I dropped on the floor. Then that should be the last part. Should be ready to start it up and bleed out the cooling system. Alright, well I got the radiator all in, all the hoses in. I already poured some coolant in the radiator, so this job is pretty much done. Probably the most difficult part is getting those nuts back on the fan. That's, you know, a tight area, so that was a big pain, but that's probably the most aggravating part about this whole job, honestly. So anyway, when you get done, don't forget to put your sticker that shows, you know, when you did this. It's useful if you're going to sell your car one day, you know, have a sticker on there. So I guess before we go, let's fire it up and see if it starts. I still have to put it outside and let the air out of the cooling system, but go. It's alive again. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.